This is in the book. No, really, they even say, where there's a whip, there's a will. And yet, maybe they don't sing it, but this scene is in the book. And it's awesome. And I love it. I love it. What is the end of the Third Age? The End of the Third Age is the final book of The Lord of the Rings, and the conclusion of the saga. The plot, you all know. Frodo and Sam must make their final trek across Mordor as the ring's spell on the heroic hobbit grows stronger with the hour. They must make it to Mount Doom before the One Ring destroys Frodo's mind for good, but that's not really what the End of the Third Age is about. Spoilers, but Frodo and Sam destroy the ring in the first third of the book, and it's only then that the real plot unfolds. What happens once the Dark Lord is defeated? What becomes of Middle-earth and the people living in it? War leaves a mark, and the War of the Ring is no exception. So, what happens now? How does the world of the End of the Third Age work? Well, this time around, I actually will be detailing the world of Middle-earth itself, because the destruction of the One Ring creates a massive paradigm shift in how the world operates. It is the end of the Third Age, after all. Before I get to that, though, I should mention one detail, that being the nature of orcs, which is revealed in this book. As Frodo explains to Sam, the power that made the orcs cannot create, only corrupt. So, the orcs were once other beings, before Sauron's power infected them and turned them into his evil minions. On the one hand, I think this makes Tolkien's orcs more nuanced than most other orcs in fiction. Like his elves, if you don't have that religious lens to see them with, the orcs' evil may appear to simply be the result of their blood, their internal racial characteristics, which, rightfully in my opinion, strikes many readers as too similar to the way in which we dehumanize certain races or religions in our world. By making the evil the result of an external corruption, though, Tolkien makes his orcs the demons to his elves angels. They are evil because they carry in them a piece of the source of evil. At the same time, though, Frodo points out how orcs are still sentient beings, who eat, sleep, and presumably can have babies and make families, which rather undermines the demonic parallels Tolkien seems to be going for. Even if they are corrupted, the fact that they are still mortal and sentient humanizes orcs in a way that I don't think Tolkien intended, and will certainly make the fact that it's still perfectly okay to kill them rather suspect to many a reader, myself included. This ties into the first major change of Middle-earth, the Scouring of the Shire. Unlike in the Jackson films, when Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin return to the Shire, they discover that it's been industrialized and taken over by humans. After Sam's vision in The Ring Goes South, I was intrigued, because it seemed like rather than an external force overtaking the Shire, the hobbits there were willingly tearing down the forest of their own accord, and it turns out that's kind of what happened? But Tolkien is quick to make the point that only the hobbits who weren't satisfied with their stations in life, like Lotho Sackville Baggins or Ted Sandyman, were willing to trade and make bargains with humans, which led to the humans overtaking and generally ruining the Shire. The majority of hobbits, the good ones, were all just innocent bystanders who were powerless to stop the strong, powerful men from taking over. Or they might be men? They might also be orcs. Merry refers to them as half-orcs, but the narrative refers to them as men, and treats them as humans. But they're also described as having sallow skin and squinting eyes, which are qualities Tolkien used to describe orcs. Although, another interpretation, if you're aware of some of Tolkien's letters, then you know that he gave orcs these qualities because he associated them with the degraded and repulsive versions of the, to Europeans, least lovely Mongol types. So, the Shire might have been taken over by orcs, or it might have been taken over by Asian people. What exactly are you trying to say, Tolkien?
Yes, well, I think I ought to say at this point that that was all made up. Honda haven't really bought the British government. It's a completely silly idea. Or is it?
So, long story short, orcs are complicated. Tolkien seems to have been aware of this complication as he spent the rest of his life dissatisfied with his portrayal of them and picking apart at the idea. He never found a solution that satisfied him, though, and in The Lord of the Rings, the unfortunate implications with regards to orcs abound, to say nothing of the successive fantasy authors who grafted Tolkien's orcs, minus the religious underpinnings, onto their own fiction. Oh, yeah, and then after this Yellow Peril incident, the Shire Brexits from the rest of Middle-earth, with the newly crowned King Aragorn banishing all humans from the place, which, to me at least, rather defeats the whole fucking point of the book. But, whatever. See, the thing is, unlike with The Hobbit, where Bilbo goes there and back again without the world changing that much, from the beginning of The Lord of the Rings, it's made clear that whatever happens with regards to Sauron, things cannot go back to the way they once were. Each of the 4 hobbits who set out with the ring comes back with battle scars and shell shock. Frodo is plagued by nightmares and simply cannot readjust to civilian life. Merry and Pippin remain in contact with their friends in the outside world, even choosing to die in Rohan and Gondor instead of the Shire. And even Sam, who settles back into the Shire the most easily, has become bolder and more assertive in his time away. The end of the Third Age is the end of myth and magic. The elves sail out into the west, never to return again. The dwarves mix and mingle with men until their race dwindles away. The humans slowly forget the events of the Third Age, letting it slip into legend and song. And no one really knows what happens to the hobbits after the lives of our 4 heroes end. Frodo joins the elves on their journey into the west. Merry and Pippin journey to Rohan and Gondor to spend their final days there. And after being elected mayor of the Shire 7 times, Sam gives the book chronicling his adventures to his daughter, before joining Frodo in the Dying Lands. Even as this age ends, a new age begins, because nothing ever really ends. But with the passing of this age, something has been lost that will never come back. What does the end of the Third Age have to say? Well, for one thing, you can't go home again. Or at least, you can't go back and still be the same person you were when you left. The critics of Tolkien, like Michael Moorcock, usually cite his conservatism as their main complaint. According to them, in Middle-earth, everyone knows their place, and even after going on a grand adventure, they return to their well-ordered stations in life, never breaking out of the world's twee romanticized medievalism. I can see some validity to this criticism in instances like the Scouring of the Shire or Eowyn settling down with Faramir, which, given the rules of this patriarchal society, is probably the happiest ending Eowyn could have gotten, but which didn't satisfy me as much as Tolkien probably wanted. Even so, though, to say that nothing has changed after all this and everyone happily goes back to their proper place, it simply isn't true. Everything has changed, and even those who do return to their old lives aren't the same as they were before they left. It's like Thorin's final message in The Hobbit. I don't think that Tolkien wants to return to a magical time that never was. Just try to hold on to as much as we can as everything changes around us. We can't stop time. We can't stop the old age ending and the new age beginning. But we can preserve things of value, even if only in myth and song. And in the end, isn't that the whole reason we tell stories? When we talk about allegory versus applicability, it's sometimes easy to forget some of the truly boneheaded allegories people ascribed to The Lord of the Rings when it first came out. Tolkien himself even wrote a poetic answer to them all in the form of, "The Lord of the Rings is one of those things, if you like it you do, if you don't then you boo." But I think, while Tolkien may have cordially disliked allegory in all its manifestations, this doesn't make The Lord of the Rings a political escapism. Rather, the lack of a set allegory is part of the larger message. The idea that values and beliefs worth conserving are timeless. Things like love and peace and the appreciation of food and cheer and song above hoarded gold. These are all things that transcend specific kingdoms, languages, and religions. Maybe I've gotten it all wrong. I'm sure some Tolkien scholar is furiously typing out all the mistakes and inaccuracies in this video right now, but I feel pretty confident in applying this lens to my view of Middle-earth. And it makes me glad that I finally decided to take this journey. Final verdict. In the last woman count, we have an unprecedented number of femoids. Not only do Eowyn, Arwen, Galadriel, Ioreth, and Lobelia make their return, but there's Melwy, Ioreth's cousin, Rose, Sam's wife, Eleanor and Goldilocks, Sam's daughters, Diamond, Pippin's wife, and Estella, Merry's wife. Not only that, but there are an unspecified number of women who work with Ioreth in the Houses of Healing, so that brings the count for this book up to at least 12. Heavens! I can feel the sad puppies positively quaking in their boots. As for me, I think I would give the end of the Third Age, as well as the whole Lord of the Rings saga, an 8 out of 10. The Lord of the Rings will never be one of my favorites. There's too much about it that simply doesn't connect with me. And yet, Tolkien's prose is beautiful. His sense of scale and wonder is epic, and his understanding that the end of one story is only the beginning of another is one that I wish more fantasy authors would take to heart. Even with the narrative conventions and social underpinnings that have aged poorly, there is still so much of beauty and value in The Lord of the Rings, and I think it truly deserves all the fame and acclaim it has garnered over the years. To answer the question that many of you are probably wondering, should I read these books? I think the answer depends largely on what you want to get out of the story. If you're just looking for a fantasy adventure with modern narrative conventions, I honestly think the Peter Jackson films are your best bet. Yeah, there's a lot that they left out, but you'll still get the basic story and themes with less florid prose. If you're interested in exploring more than the movies, that's really the key to things. How you handle Tolkien's long, poetic descriptions of nature or his interjection of poems and songs into the story is a good litmus test for how you'll handle the books in general. If you find those boring, then save yourself the trouble and listen to the BBC radio drama instead. It's truer to the text while still trimming enough fat that you can more easily digest it. If you can handle Tolkien's prose though, then I'd say it's well worth it to give The Lord of the Rings a read. As for myself, I now face the question, was it worth it for me to put off reading The Lord of the Rings as long as I did? The more I think about it, the more inclined I am to say yes. The things that didn't connect with me now are all things that wouldn't have connected with me as a kid, so I do think my initial fear of becoming obsessed with Tolkien was unfounded. I have my own experiences and my own beliefs, which inform my own writing, and those experiences and beliefs are different enough from Tolkien's that I'm pretty confident an earlier reading of him wouldn't have sent me down a different path as a writer. But I also think that it was a blessing to have read Tolkien after having read so many of his successors, and having that understanding of the broader context of his works. If I had finished reading The Lord of the Rings as a kid, I'd probably have grown just as disillusioned with his fantasy races as I did with The Legend of Drizzt in high school, not being aware of the religious underpinnings that informed their creation. I was still too young to fully understand the melancholy and scars that permeate the books, and shameful as it may be to admit, when I was a kid, I found Tolkien's prose boring instead of beautiful. It wasn't until I grew up, growing aware of the larger tradition of myth and fantasy, experiencing pain and tragedy, learning to appreciate poetry and the way that language can sing, that I was able to fully appreciate Tolkien. There's an almost 20-year difference between the publication of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So maybe it's fitting that I took 20 years of growing up before I finally sat down and gave the story another chance. So for now, I'm Mark Rapine, signing off, and I hope you liked this video. If you did, and you would like to see me make more, please leave a like or comment down below, share my video via Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or other means, and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you would like to help this channel out, I have a Patreon which you can contribute to via the link in the description. If you sign up, you will get sweet bonuses like an internet hug, early access to videos, and the ability to vote in polls to help me decide which works to cover next. Also, if I manage to get to 250 subscribers by the end of this year, that is 250 YouTube subscribers, by January 1st, 2022, I will play and stream Dragon Quest V for you all. Let's make this happen, please. I want to do this, people. I want to do this. I want to do it. So please, thank you all, and I will see you in the next one.